20 to get free shipping and 20% off your first order. I am your host for the College Football Show, Mike Goodpaster. Right now, I'd like to welcome in direct from Clemson in a dorm room where everybody's in tears, Sam Teets. How you doing, Sam?
I'm doing good, Mike. How about you?
All right, so we might as well start there. Number 1 versus number 4, Notre Dame versus Clemson. What was your take on this game? Are you one of these people that says, Notre Dame had to play or had to get a double overtime win against a team without Trevor Lawrence? Or does this say more about Notre Dame?
I don't know if it's more about Notre Dame so much as I'm disappointed in the way Clemson played. For a large part, I know offensively you couldn't establish a running game with Travis Etienne. Notre Dame's defense played great, by the way. I'll give them that. Their defense, when it came to shutting down the run, was great. Offensive line did a good job giving Ian Book time, so they had very good parts of their game. But when you get the Ian Book fumble in the end zone, Clemson recovers that. Not scoring, going 4 and out, not scoring on that drive is terrible. You basically lose all momentum that you had gained from stopping Ian Book there. And then when they turn the ball over on downs with, I think, 3 minutes left in the game, you get back to Notre Dame, and they still have 2 full minutes. You didn't run the clock basically whatsoever. Travis Etienne ran out of bounds towards the end of that 4 and out. And Clemson's defense should never have come back on the field. It should have been it. After Notre Dame turned that ball over in 4 and downs, it should have been over. The offense should have run the clock out, but they couldn't do that. To me, that's just terrible game management, and that's why they lost ultimately.
Yeah, and when you look at the backup quarterback throw for 439 yards and 2 scores, the question is, what exactly could Trevor Lawrence have done different? The only thing Trevor Lawrence could have done to change this game is if he would have played defensive line, because Kyron Williams ran for 140 yards and 3 scores. Ian Book made big plays when they needed to be made, and he's really maligned, but he's a guy that really came through yesterday, especially in the clutch at the end of the game.
Yeah, my take on Ian Book's always been negative, resoundingly over the past couple of years, but I think he's eliminated a lot of the mistakes he was making, because he used to be a guy who I think would turn the ball over in the clutch or really would have just silly mistakes. Obviously, the fumble in the end zone was one of them, and that could have cost him the game, but ultimately it didn't. So he kind of avoids that storyline. Ian Book is much improved based on the last couple of years. He's been much better this season based on what he was prior to this year. So I give him credit for improving. Obviously, he's still not an elite quarterback. I think you could make the argument that Uiagalelei is almost better than him already, but at the same point, Ian Book has the experience. He came out. He, like you said, he performed well in situations when they needed him to, especially at the end of the game.
All right, there's going to be a rematch of this game probably if both teams win out. Do you think the rematch is any different?
Yes, to some degree, because Clemson has been very beat up, very injured. I'm going to pull up names right now because I have something right here telling me that. But James Skalski, our defensive captain, middle linebacker, he was out for the game. He did not play whatsoever. They're also missing defensive end Justin Foster, defensive tackle Tyler Davis, linebacker Mike Jones Jr. Those guys are all starters. They didn't play yesterday. Trevor Lawrence didn't play. And they lost starting guard Matt Bockhurst during the game, and they also lost Brian Brzee, Andrew Booth, Nolan Turner, and safety Landon Zanders at different points during the game. So they had a ton of injuries. And if those guys are all back for the rematch, Clemson's going to win.
Okay. Well, you said Clemson was going to win, on Thursday or Friday's NFL show, and you were wrong then. So I think there's a lot of homer going here, but I agree with you. Brian Kelly, though, was 0-7, I think, against teams ranked in the AP top 5 going into this game while he's been at Notre Dame. I think this is a huge win for the Irish. But I still think from watching this team play, let's not forget Clemson struggled last week, almost got beat, had to come back from a double digit, losing a game by double digits then. And the past few years, we've seen Clemson struggle with teams they shouldn't have, maybe occasionally lose to somebody they shouldn't have. But then when the time comes to get to the college playoff or to the ACC championship game, they're rolling by then. So I'll assume that's the way you think this season's going to go for them.
Well, I don't know, Mike, because I thought that was going to happen after almost losing to Boston College. I thought they were going to start rolling this week. So now coming out and losing this game to me, it kind of puts some question mark. Are they actually going to turn the year around? Just watching this defense and watching this team right now, on the offensive line specifically, because they couldn't establish a running game whatsoever, this is probably the weakest Clemson team in the past, since Kelly Bryant was the starting quarterback full-time. This is probably the weakest team since then.
Well, and I'll tell you this, don't write Notre Dame off too quickly because of everything you just said, because Notre Dame's still going to be able to run the ball on them. It's going to come down to if Ian Book can make those plays again. But I don't think there's any reason to just haphazardly ignore Notre Dame. And I also think there's no reason to keep Clemson in the top 4 right now, even though they probably will be, Sam.
Well, I don't know about that because I think they could fall to 5. Because you talked about Cincinnati quite a bit. And I could see the top 5 or the top 4 teams being Alabama, Ohio State, Notre Dame, and Cincinnati. That being the top 4. And Georgia, which is number 5, entering the weekend, and Clemson, which was number 1. I can see those 2 teams being 5 and 6.
You really think they're going to put Cincinnati at number 4 over Clemson? Clemson's number 1. They just lost in double overtime at Notre Dame. Clemson's the darlings of everything. My question is, this number 1, what's Clemson done to be ranked in the top 4 this year?
They did clobber Miami, and Miami's number 11 right now in the poll?
Yeah. Well, you could say the same thing as Cincinnati clobbered, 2 teams that are ranked also. SMU, I think, is 16th. I think they were 13th or 14th when UC blew them out. But my other case here is Ohio State doesn't belong in the top 4 yet because they haven't beaten or played anybody worth a damn yet.
No, I'm totally with you. I have another podcast to do for a different website where we talked about this. Basically, these Big Ten teams, they're ranked so high, but I mean, who have they played? What have they done yet? They're 2 weeks into their season. I don't understand how Wisconsin, which is 1-0, is at 10. I don't understand how Ohio State is number 3 already. They'll probably be number 2 by the time this is all said and done. They haven't played anyone yet. And I mean, they're so young into the season. These other teams are 6-7 games in. I don't understand how they're that high.
Yeah, they don't deserve to be there. And I'll tell you this. I know Michigan and Penn State aren't what people thought they would be, but in the end, it deserves to be ranked above Ohio State right now.
Well, they play better competition, but I think the poll also takes into account talent on the roster. And they're looking at someone like Justin Fields, and it's probably the difference maker, right?
I don't know. Michael Penix, I think, is just as good, if not better. I really believe that. I'm not sold on Justin Fields. I think another team that you would have to consider at number 4 would be Florida. Kyle Trask, I think we'll talk about it in a minute, may be the leading guy right now for the Heisman Trophy. And when you look at that, I mean, you've got a team like BYU who scorched Boise State on Friday. The question is going to be, no matter what any of these teams do that's not in a Power 5 conference, do they have a chance to get in? And my concern is Notre Dame plays Clemson. Well, what if Clemson beats them 47-40 in overtime the next game? They're going to put them both in there. And then you've got to Georgia, Alabama. What if they play a close game in the SEC championship game? I have a lot of concerns here, even though we see a lot of teams that aren't Power 5 teams up here, if any of them will get the chance or not. And I think when I watched the Cincinnati Bearcats play, the Cincinnati Bearcats are one of the 4 best teams in the country. They beat a really good Army team by a couple touchdowns. Houston is a team that would give most teams problems. They beat them 38-10. They blew out SMU. SMU is a really good football team. And the thing is, I don't know that you see in the last 3 or 4 games against good competition, including Memphis, I don't think they've given up more than 10 or 12 points.
Yeah, that's really the issue. Are they even going to get a shot at playing in the college football playoffs? And I think they'll be given a chance down the line, but it's really going to come down to that final week, those conference championship games, right? I mean, if Clemson loses again to Notre Dame, obviously they're out. Or if maybe they clobber Notre Dame or Notre Dame has trouble somewhere down the line, maybe Notre Dame gets booted out. But if that doesn't happen, if you don't have the conference championships play out right, Cincinnati probably won't get in. They could go undefeated, and they probably still won't get in unless they get help from other teams losing.
All right, so let's take a look at the Heisman Trophy, which, I mean, it's a screwy year to do that with some guys who played like a game and other guys are on like game 9. But I guess we have to look at it at some point. Right now, to me, Kyle Trask would be my leading guy to get there, to be number 1 in the Heisman race. What's your take on it right now?
Yeah, I'm surprised at how much he's not in the debate or how many times I don't see him pop up. I look at all these rankings the way that it's always Mac Jones is like the number 1 guy. I understand he's putting up great numbers right now, and Justin Fields for some reason is even in the top 5. I don't understand that whatsoever because he's played 2 games. To me, Justin Fields can't win the Heisman this year because he won't have played enough games to potentially even go that far. There's also guys like Zach Wilson up there. I think Travis Etienne and Trevor Lawrence are fairly out of the conversation at this point because Lawrence has missed 2 games. Etienne had a bad game against Boston College and a bad one. Well, a decent game against Boston College and a bad one against Notre Dame. I would lean towards Kyle Trask or Mac Jones at this point, right? I mean, it's got to be one of those 2. Maybe Zach Wilson has a little bit of a dark horse campaign, but I think it's between Mac Jones and Trask.
I like Zach Wilson. I mean, 13.3 yards per pass. That's not per completion. And Boise State's not a pushover. They're always a top 20 team. He put 51 points on them at the blue turf there. I don't see how Justin Fields could be in here because, I mean, the Penn State game that he played seems a lot less remarkable after Penn State gets smacked by Maryland yesterday. And when I look at it right now, it's Kyle Trask, hands down, with Mac Jones, and I think Zach Wilson would be there. Trevor Lawrence gets hurt because he's missed a couple games because of the COVID. So maybe he'll want to come back and win the Heisman next year instead of going to New York and being a Jet, Sam.
You know what? If that's your option, you might want to choose going back to win the Heisman because honestly, playing for the Jets right now, that's kind of like a sentence in purgatory, basically. Why would you want to do that?
Nobody wants to do that. All right, we have an upside down Big Ten. Right now, if you look at the Big Ten standings, the Big Ten, one side is led by Northwestern, the other side by Indiana. Who would have ever thought we'd have saw that, Sam?
No, it's a crazy year. That's the only way I think it's possible for us to see something like this. Because otherwise, you'd never see us in a normal year. At least you wouldn't anticipate it. I mean, it's just.
I think you would. I mean, how's it not a normal year? They're just playing each other. And the thing that's amazing is this: Northwestern, Indiana, Purdue, and Maryland are combined 10-1. Michigan, Penn State, Iowa, and Nebraska are combined 2-9. And you throw in the fact that Rutgers scored 27 points against Ohio State. That's more than what Rutgers has scored in their last 4 meetings combined. I believe this. I believe Indiana is going to go to Ohio State and beat them in a few weeks.
I'll be honest. I don't know nearly as much about Indiana football as you do, but you seem very confident in this team so far. I mean, do they have just the pure talent though to keep up with them along, especially along the defensive and offensive lines? Are they going to be able to win those games in the trenches?
Yeah, I think they will. I mean, we saw them dominate Michigan. Michigan's talent level is not that much less than Ohio State. Ohio State's just coached a little bit better, maybe, and they might be a little bit deeper. But the other thing is this: when you look at Indiana, Indiana's offense has not had a problem scoring points against Ohio State the last 5 or 6 years. You get all kind of games. You see that are 48-38, 46-40, where IU has a chance but blows it. The big difference this year is Indiana's defense, I think, is much better. Michael Penix is a big-time player at quarterback. You got the Phil Yaw kid at wide receiver, Stevie Scott running the ball. Offensive line-wise, the Hoosiers are very good. Defensive line-wise, they're very good. So I think the Indiana Hoosiers are the best team in Indiana also. So that's for all you Notre Dame fans that are flying high off yesterday. I think Notre Dame would get smacked by Indiana right now. I think Indiana's better than Notre Dame. And I think Tom Allen's done an unbelievable job. And that's me eating crow because I thought Tom Allen was a joke until this year. But when you see the way these guys play, when you see the way they respond to him, I mean, Indiana is going to be a factor in the Big Ten for the next decade with Tom Allen at the helm.
When you mentioned the scoring, they put 36 on Penn State, 37 on Rutgers, and 38 on Michigan. So they've been scoring perfectly fine. My question to you is, what do they – I mean, if they beat Ohio State, they should be in the top 4 then, obviously. But do you see them potentially having a chance to go undefeated here and win the Big Ten, like basically win the conference championship, get into the Final Four?
If they beat Ohio State, they're going to win the Big Ten. The only question there is Northwestern. Northwestern, very good coach, very good quarterback in Peyton Ramsey. The interesting thing there is Peyton Ramsey was the starting quarterback at Indiana until Michael Penix got there last year as a freshman, had a really good year. He was hurt. Peyton Ramsey filled in, played well for him. Then, when the season was over, Peyton Ramsey transfers to Northwestern. And when I look at this, I really never thought I would ever be on a show saying this. But if Indiana beats Ohio State, Indiana's going to play for a national championship in football.
Yeah, that's something that I don't think any of us would anticipate going into the year. And this is moving forward. Will we see more of an in-conference schedule in college football because, we get these cool things coming out, these cool storylines coming out of this year that we don't always have happen because teams sometimes play weaker out-of-conference schedules and stuff like that. So, are we going to see more of an in-conference matchup going forward just because of all the excitement we get out of it?
I get more excitement from non-conference games. Maybe that's because I'm an Indiana fan, and usually the only 3 wins are the 3 games before the conference schedule. But I don't know, and I think that there's a big question on how next year will go because as we see the COVID pick up, We don't know how this is going to end up. So who knows? I mean, there's a lot of things going on here that makes it hard to really predict anything. I would say that you will still have the non-conference matchups because let's face it, if you're a MAC school and you're the Miami Redhawks and you draw 8,000, 10,000 people a game, you have a hard time surviving. But if you're Miami of Ohio and you're playing the Cincinnati Bearcats and you sell out that game, you just made a lot of money. If you're Miami of Ohio and you travel to Iowa or you travel to Ohio State, you just banked $1 million for doing that. And I think because of that, I think that you still see everything status quo the way it always has been once things go back to whatever normal will be now. Because I think that outside of the Power Five conferences, those schools that get the payoffs to go play those games are really going to be affected if they're not playing them anymore, and they may not be able to continue to play the Division I level with the 85 scholarships.
That's right. I forgot about that. We definitely, and we already seen schools because of this year. We already seen schools suffer and have to cut some programs because they're not getting the huge paydays.
Yeah. So I mean, when you look at it, I think everything will just go back to the way it was. Anything else you want to talk about? Oklahoma destroyed Kansas 62-9.
Yeah, but I think we saw a little bit of that come. What about Florida, Georgia, though? Because the Florida Gators beat the Georgia Bulldogs 44-28. Now, obviously, most of that was behind Kyle Trask playing phenomenal football once again. But, I mean, what does this do to the national rankings now? Because Georgia's number 5, Florida's number 8 going into the week. I mean, what does it do? Because there's so many – I mean, it's kind of toss-up the way these teams have won now. Florida has lost to Texas A&M, I believe. Georgia now has lost to Alabama and Florida. What do we think is going to happen moving forward with the SEC?
I don't know. I think a lot of times the SEC gets overrated just because Alabama's in it. I mean, come on. It seems like Georgia and Florida come up short every time they get in a big situation. Do you think the SEC is by far the dominant conference in college football, or is it just Alabama?
No, honestly, in previous years, I thought, like last season, I thought the Big Ten was better, if I'm being honest.
Depth-wise. Yeah, depth-wise, yeah. And
yes.
That's the thing. When you see this, I mean, hell, you've talked about the weirdest thing about this season is you've got Pac-12 teams that are only going to play 7 games. So maybe the Pac-12 has figured out how to get in the National College Playoff, play less games so they don't get upset, just beat each other. And maybe USC goes 7-0 in the Pac-12 and maybe they slip into the Final Four. So I'm going to ask you that question. Can a Pac-12 team get in here, or should they even deserve to? Because when I look at it, to me, USC, I mean, put it like this, the Cincinnati Bearcats and BYU would go dominate the Pac-12, I believe, this year.
No, I agree with you. The Pac-12 should not have a team get into the college football playoffs.
They shouldn't be allowed to with a 7-game season that doesn't start till November.
And there was also the thing with even with the Big Ten, an 8-game season that started in late October. I was questioning whether or not they should even be allowed in because I believe their season ends right around, or if not after, when they're picking the teams originally scheduled to make the college football playoffs. In my mind, you should change the date of the selection process because of the Big Ten.
Yeah, I think the championship game is what, December 19th or December 20th?
It's right around where they're picking the date for the final 4 teams.
Ooh. If it maybe Indiana will be in that game, and if it's December the 19th, I can go watch it on my birthday because I think that they would allow media in, and I was scheduled for it last year, but I didn't go because I didn't want to watch Ohio State beat up Northwestern.
No, I think they would let you in, Mike, and that would be a good game to go watch for you. But the AP poll, I mean, I've had a lot of issues with the AP poll this year because Oregon, who hasn't played a game yet or didn't play a game prior to this week, is number 12 overall from the Pac-12. I hate how they've done it so far. I don't think any Big Ten team should be in the top 4 right now because they've only played 2 games. I don't think any Pac-12 team should even be on the list at the point because they haven't done anything. So to me, I think they're overvaluing teams just based on what they saw on the roster versus based on what they've actually done so far.
I don't even think it's because they went to saw on the roster. I just think it's because of the name of the team. I mean, Oregon's always going to be ranked at the top 20. It's like Notre Dame's almost always going to be in the top 20. No matter what they've got, no matter what they did the year before, you get the legacy ranking. You know, Michigan gets a legacy ranking every year. Alabama doesn't need it. Clemson doesn't need it. But Miami of Florida even still, I mean, if they're ranked 10th, you know, they probably should be ranked 20th to 25th because they're going to be overrated just because of what they used to do.
Well, even the Florida Gators, after Tim Tebow left, for the first couple of years after Tebow left, they were always opening the season in the top 10. And by the end of the year, they were always down in the low teens, if not in the 20s.
Yeah, so we get that all the time. I mean, Notre Dame's always going to get the benefit of the doubt until they play a good team where they lose, but they didn't last night. They beat Clemson. And I'll tell you, I've seen Notre Dame lose when they played up so many times. It really makes me doubt how good Clemson is. And I hate to
Yeah.
be that way. And if you're an Irish fan, it was a great win. I didn't expect you guys to win the game. But I mean, and this is the thing. I did the beating the spread show for Rockfin, where I picked the 5 biggest games of the week. I was 4-1. My one loss was Notre Dame.
See, you just barely missed it. But to me, I mean, Notre Dame's a very talented team. And especially, I love the linebacker. I'm not going to pronounce his last name right. I know I'm going to get it wrong. But Jeremiah Owusu Karamoa, he's the linebacker for Notre Dame. He was phenomenal. He's going to be a future first-round pick in the draft. And they have really good players on Notre Dame. But I don't think Notre Dame's that good of a football team. I don't think Notre Dame's a top 4 team. And Clemson right now, obviously not playing like a top 4 team. It's very disappointing. I think we learned a lot about both teams last night. But to me, Clemson, like I said, this is the weakest Clemson team since the year they had Kelly Bryant quarterback.
Kelly Bryant wasn't that bad, though.
No, he wasn't. But that team was definitely not nearly as good as the ones Trevor Lawrence captained in the past 2 years.
All right. Anything else you want to discuss college football-wise?
I think we covered basically all the big games from yesterday.
All right, Sam. And we will be back tomorrow at 1 o'clock to do the NFL show. We'll wrap up, recap all the NFL games from today. You can follow Sam Teets at SamTeets33. This is not an NFL show, so I don't have to bring up Manscaped and try to embarrass you. So we won't. But I just put the button in there and paused because you knew something was coming. But there's not really. All right, guys, we're going to wrap it up because Sam's got stuff to do at Clemson. I think he's going down to watch film with Coach Dabo Sweeney to try to help him out so they can beat Notre Dame the next time they play. But for now, for Sam Teets, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening and watching to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.